When the world fell apart, one man chose to build again, not with stone and sword, but with prayer and purpose. His name was Benedict of Nursia. He withdrew from the ruins of Rome to seek God in silence. From that silence came a movement that would rebuild faith, culture, and hope. His life reminds us that holiness can restore a broken world, and that obedience, simplicity, and prayer can outlast empires. Benedict was born around AD 480 in Nursia, a small town in central Italy. It was a time when the Western Roman Empire had fallen. Barbarian invasions, political instability, and moral collapse filled the land. Rome, once proud and powerful, had become a city of ruins. Violence, corruption, and despair marked daily life. The old order had crumbled, and the world seemed adrift. In this darkness, Benedict sought light not in politics or power, but in purity of soul. He left his studies in Rome, disgusted by its moral decay, and withdrew into the wilderness to seek God alone. Benedict found refuge in a remote cave near Subiaco, living as a hermit for 3 years. A local monk named Romanus provided him with food and guidance, lowering bread to him by a rope. In the silence of that cave, Benedict learned the disciplines that would define his life: prayer, fasting, obedience, and humility. He fought inner battles of temptation and despair, but found victory in surrender to God. When word of his holiness spread, others came seeking his counsel. Communities formed around him, and a movement began, not of rebellion, but of renewal. Benedict's wisdom drew disciples who longed for spiritual stability in a world of chaos. He organized them into communities governed by a balance of prayer, work, and study. He called it ora et labora, pray and work. To guide these communities, Benedict wrote a document known as the Rule of Saint Benedict. It was not harsh like earlier monastic codes. It was merciful, practical, and deeply spiritual. Its guiding principle was moderation, a balance between discipline and compassion, solitude and fellowship, devotion and labor. The Rule of Saint Benedict became one of the most influential documents in Christian history. It begins with a call to obedience. Listen carefully, my son, to the Master's instructions, and attend to them with the ear of your heart. It emphasizes humility, silence, and service. Virtues often lost in both comfort and chaos. Every monk was to see his daily tasks, whether cooking, cleaning, or copying scripture, as an act of worship. Work was not punishment, but participation in God's order. The day was divided between prayer, the divine office, labor, study, and rest, each given purpose, each sanctified by rhythm. As Benedict's influence grew, so did opposition. Some envied his authority, others resisted his discipline. According to tradition, a group of rebellious monks once tried to poison him, but when he blessed the cup, it shattered. Later, he founded a new monastery on Monte Cassino, between Rome and Naples, a strategic spiritual stronghold that would become the cradle of Western monasticism. There, he preached, taught, and lived out the principles of order in a disordered world. The monasteries that followed Benedict's rule became centers of learning, agriculture, and charity. They preserved scripture and classical literature during Europe's darkest centuries. They fed the poor, cared for the sick, and educated the young. Long after Rome's empire had fallen, Benedict's spiritual empire flourished. His communities became the foundation of Christian civilization in the West. As one historian wrote, "When men forgot how to build, Benedict taught them again." Near the end of his life, Benedict sensed that his earthly work was finished. On March 21, AD 547, he asked to be taken to the chapel at Monte Cassino. There he received the Eucharist, lifted his hands in prayer, and died standing before the altar. He met death not in fear, but in worship, his final act an offering to the God he had served in silence and service. The monk who had fled the world became one of the world's greatest builders of faith. Law saw a world collapsing under sin, demanded control, and offered only rules to restrain the chaos. Grace whispered to Benedict in a cave, teaching him that true order comes not from power, but from peace with God. Law said, "Preserve what is lost." Grace said, "Renew what is broken." Benedict teaches us that holiness begins in hidden places. Renewal starts not in power but in prayer. He reminds us that obedience and humility are not weakness, they are strength under discipline. And he shows us that when the world falls apart, God often rebuilds it through quiet souls who simply live faithfully day by day. Benedict's life asks us, where is God calling you to bring order out of chaos? Have you let prayer become the foundation of your work? Pray today, Lord, give me focus, teach me to seek you in stillness, to find strength in obedience, and to build faith wherever you place me. Help me bring light, peace, and order to a disordered world. And remember, the same Christ who called Benedict from a collapsing empire to build a spiritual one, still calls us today. When the world loses its way, let your faith become its compass. When noise overwhelms, let your silence preach peace. In every act of prayer and service, you too can rebuild what the world has forgotten.